Hi, Mr. Phil here. I'm ready to tell you another story, so I hope you're ready to listen. Here goes. Gonna put on my storytelling cap. This story is called The Magic Peach Pit. Now, this story is a pretty old story. It's a story that takes place in the city of London, England. Long time ago, there was a young man. His name was James. Now, James was an orphan. He lived on the street. James, like everyone else, had to have food, had to have a place to stay. But James didn't necessarily have a job. And James became a common thief. He would steal things in order to be able to buy food, in order to be able to pay for some place to live. Now, James lived this way for a long time. He wasn't very proud of himself for being a common thief. He didn't particularly like it, but he was kind of forced to live that way, with no other means. Now, as time went on, because James got older and older, and yes, he worked doing odd jobs every once in a while to get away from a life of crime. But then that job would end and he still would have to feed himself. Well, one day when James was older, he met a young lady. And James fell in love. Now, she fell in love with him. They spent a lot of time together. And they decided that they would get married. But before the young lady would marry James, she made him promise to give up his life of crime. And he accepted that. So on they went, getting ready to get married, and James really wanted to give her a wedding ring. But he didn't have enough money, even though he was working. And then, on a very unfortunate day, a situation presented itself, and James was going past the jewelry store, and he saw that the jeweler had left a ring on the counter, and he rushed in and took it. And lo and behold, as he exited the store, there were the police to arrest him. Off they took him to the magistrates, who threw him in jail. Now, James was pretty sad about that, because all of a sudden he could not be with the girl that he planned to marry. And he was sorry that he had stolen the ring. And while he sat in jail, he kept thinking, how can I get out of here? What can I do to get out of jail? Now, of course, when he was in jail, they would feed him. They would bring him food every day, a breakfast, a lunch, a dinner. And on one of those days, they brought him a piece of fruit. Why? It was a peach. James loved the flavor of the peach, and he ate it all down, but you all know when you eat a peach, when you're all done, you are left with one thing. And yes, that is the peach pit. Now, James had that peach pit. James took that pit and he put it into a piece of cloth, folded it up, and he called out to the jailer, "Jailer, jailer, I have a present for the judge. Would you please bring me to him so I can give it?" And the jailer would laugh. The next day, James would do the same thing. "Jailer, jailer, I have a present for the judge. Will you bring me to him?" The jailer would laugh. As this went on day after day, one day the jailer finally got tired of hearing James ask. And he said, "Okay, I will bring you to the judge." And off they went. And into the courtroom. There, seated in front of him, was the judge. And on either side was an assistant judge. James stood before him, and the judge said, James, what is it that you want? James looked at him and said, Your Honor, I have a gift for you. And he put the wrapped up seed on the judge's desk. The judge very carefully opened it up, and when he looked at it, looked back at James. What is this? A peach pit? What kind of gift is this? And James said, Your Honor, it's not just any peach pit, for it is a magical peach pit. Magical, James? What do you mean? Your Honor, this peach pit, when it grows, becomes a tree and gives fruit. This peach pit will give solid gold fruit. Solid gold fruit, James? I don't believe that. It is true, Your Honor. Well, James, if that was true, why didn't you plant it and get the golden fruit? Your Honor, the reason I did not plant it, for when it was given to me, I was told that had you ever done anything wrong in your life, the tree would never give the golden fruit. It would just give the normal peach fruit. Therefore, I am not worthy of this peach pit. But I know, Your Honor, you are. Well, the judge sat there and he looked at that peach pit and then began to recall that during his lifetime, he had done some things that were not right. He had hurt people along the way. And he knew he could not plant this magic peach pit and have it grow golden peaches. So he looked at James and said, Thank you, but I am not worthy of this. I'm going to give it to one of my assistant judges. And he handed that peach pit. That assistant judge looked at it, held it in his hand, began thinking of his past and his errors along the way. And he knew he could not get the golden fruit. The other assistant judge was the same way. Now finally, the head judge knew what James had done, and he laughed. He looked at James and said, James, you are very wise. I have seen what you have done. For while you have committed a crime and have spent many, many weeks in jail, the rest of us have also committed certain crimes along the way. I think, James, you have spent enough. You should be released from jail, and we will do that. But before I do that, you have to promise that you never ever will commit another act of crime. Well, of course, James agreed. He took back his peach pit. He ended up getting married to the girl of his dreams, and they had a family. And from that time forward, James passed the magic peach pit down to his son, who passed it to his son, to his son, to his son. And that is the story of the magic peach pit.